Hey there, let's get cracking on module 3 and let's figure out this money situation. So I am not going to go through all of the details here at the top. I covered a lot of that in the intro video and you can read it for yourself. It's totally self-explanatory. What I will do though is I want to call your attention to this quote that's on the bottom by Mastin Kipp. And Mastin Kipp says that we must be willing to live a few years how most people can't, so that you can live the rest of your life how most people won't. And here's the deal. No matter where you are on the spectrum of doing work you love, whether you are at a place where you're a six-figure earner and you're cranking it out in your job and looking still to make a shift, whether you are not where you want to be money-wise, no matter where you are, the person that you need it to be to get to where you are is not the person that's going to take you to the next place. You've got to do something different. No matter how successful you may have been in the past, you are going to have to make different decisions. And those different decisions could be around your money. How you are spending now may not be the way that you can spend for the next several months if you are looking to do something different. Your comfort zone might have to be different. You know, some of us get to a place where we are accustomed to doing certain things or not doing certain things, stepping out in certain ways or not stepping out in certain ways. I don't care who you are, you're going to have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. You're going to get placed in places where you're uncertain, where you may not always know all the answers, where the safety net and the map is not always crystal clear, and you still have to put one foot in front of the other. So getting accustomed to dancing with that uncertainty, that's an example of being willing to live a few years, few days, weeks, months, maybe years, how most people won't, because that's a decision, so that you can live the rest of your life with work that's meaningful, where there's freedom and flexibility and there's an income stream and all those kinds of things that are meaningful to you. It's going to cost. And so I put that in this module because for some of you, it's going to be a cost as it relates to finances and how you view your finances and how you view your investments and how you view what you do with your time, energy, and money. And so as you go through this process and as you start to plug in and get results for yourself and start to make decisions, come back to this quote and say, hey, am I willing to live a few days, weeks, months, years like most people won't in order to live the rest of my life like most people can't? Because on the other side, when you are doing work that you love, when you're owning your schedule, when you're owning your time, when you're owning your creativity and the contribution that you're having with people, man, there's something to be said about that. There's something to be said about being masterful at something that only you can do, or being masterful at something that you are one of the few people who do it so brilliantly. But those things are choices, right? So let's dig in. So I'm going to walk you through part A and part B. And part A is called net income. And if you're on this, if you've invested in this program, you have a sense of what net income is, but let me kind of break it down for you. So let's say you have a job, your career, your gross salary is what your company pays you. That's what shows up kind of on the top of your pay stub. Then you subtract your taxes and Social Security and retirement and medical benefits and all that, and what you take home, what gets direct deposited into your account, that's your net income, your next salary, right? If you're a business owner or thinking about business, you have your gross sales, and then when you take out your expenses and taxes and all those other kinds of things, what your profit is, what you're left with, that's net income. And so oftentimes when we are faced with the decision on doing work that I love and all the steps that are required to do that, people start looking at their money. They start looking at their net income and saying, man, maybe I don't make enough money to be able to take the risks that I want to take, or maybe I don't make enough money to invest in doing whatever steps need to be taken. On the flip side, other people look at their income and like, yo, I'm making a good piece of change. And I don't know if I'm willing to risk what I have to go after something that is a lot less certain. And so more times than not, I'm talking with clients, and you might be one of them, where the biggest fear and the biggest obstacle for you has been this idea of, man, I make good money, or I make enough money and I'm not sure that one, I can make the kind of money that I'm making here if I go and try to follow my passion, or two, I don't know if I can, replace that income if I go and start that business. But what you fail to realize is that there's another kind of tax on your income. And that tax is an emotional tax, it's a physical tax, it's a mental or spiritual tax that comes with not doing work that you love. It's not tangible, and most times you haven't quantified it, but for many of us, we're paying a price for not stepping up to do work that we love. And that price could be, man, I'm sick a lot, I've got bronchitis. That price could be the lack of intimacy in my relationship with my significant other because I'm so stressed, or the lack of connection with my kids, or just the self-esteem and self-confidence issues that come with not being where you want to be in your life, not doing what you want to do, the regret that says, man, I am built for more, I'm born for more, and why have I not stepped up to do that? This exercise is going to help you to start to quantify that for yourself, okay? And so I'm going to walk you through how that works. And once we start to factor in some of these intangibles, at the end of the day, you'll start to have to make some decisions. You'll start to really look at the net effect of all of these different things on your money to figure out, man, I thought I was making X, but really when I factor into all of the price that I'm paying for staying here, maybe it's not worth it. Maybe it is worth the risk to step up and do something different, right? So that's where we're going to get to. So what's great about this section though is that I've created a couple of spreadsheets and tools already for you. Literally, you can just plug your information already in and it's going to totally calculate for you. So for instance, I'm pulling up my Excel spreadsheet, and the one that I'm going to walk you through, there is a blank one here for you. Like literally, you'll just be able to put in your own information. It's going to tally up for you, and it's already automated. So it's really kind of cool, and it's going to make it really easy for you. But let's get back to the example. So what I wanted to do is walk you through a couple of examples and then tell you what those examples mean, so that then you can start to figure out how you want to quantify some of these things for yourself. So here's how it works. Let me increase it a little bit more. So we've got Patricia as an example. Patricia's a professional. She has her career. She makes $105,000 a year. You can see that right here at the top. So what we've done is I've outlined a number of different work-related effects, things that happen in our lives that can be influenced by the kind of work that we're doing. So if we're doing work that we love, a lot of these things may not, be factors. But the fact that you are not doing work that you love may have some impact in your life, physically, relationally, emotionally, spiritually, and otherwise. So we go through a number of different scenarios, and your job is to quantify that effect on your life, positively or negatively. And it's completely subjective, because how I might value something may be very, very different than how you might value something. For instance, I was on a call with a client yesterday, and we were just talking, and there's certain things that are super important to her, but as she talked about her life, she'd been divorced, she'd done a relationship just was so not top priority for her, and she wasn't broken up about that divorce at all. It was like, I am happily divorced, I am not scarred, I am not, and so for her, relationship doesn't hold the same level of value as it might for someone else. So the fact that their relationship might be really strained as a result of them not doing work that they love would have a much greater impact than it would on my client, right? So I'm going to go through this one by one so that you kind of understand how we work it out. And then I'm going to explain how you want to think about this for yourself. So again, let's get with Patricia. So Patricia, we started to, again, she starts out with $105,000 a year. Then we started to look at, have you lost or gained undesired weight? And again, the question is, have you gained or lost undesired weight as a result of you not doing work that you love? Like, you might be happy as a lark in your job and just eating, right? And so you gaining weight may have nothing to do with not doing work that you love, but all of these questions you want to ask them of yourself as they relate to you not doing work that you love. And so for Patricia, she was like, oh my gosh, I have gotten so fat. Like I have gotten so fat. I'm eating. I'm not cooking at home. I'm eating out a lot more with my family. I'm eating fried foods, fast foods, high fat, quick eats, that kind of thing. And so she began to estimate the value, the negative value in terms of dollar amount that her undesired weight is having on her life. And so she gave it a value of $5,000. Now, the first question you're going to have is, well, how do you get to that number, right? Because it's pretty arbitrary. Well, let's scroll down a little bit. If you scroll down, you will see that there is a value key here. And the value key is, again, somewhat arbitrary, and it gives you some room to be able to think and quantify for yourself, right? Because your values may be different than my values. But here's the kind of idea. If something has a small or minimum effect on you, you want to ascribe to it somewhere between $1,000 and $5,000 in terms of impact. That impact could be positive or that impact could be negative. If the impact is neutral, like this doesn't influence me one way or the other, then you just leave that section blank. If that issue has a medium effect on you, which means like, man, I feel this, but it's not the worst thing in the world, then you'll ascribe anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 in terms of value. If there's a large effect, meaning that this is like major, major, major obstacle for me, then you're going to ascribe anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000. And again, the numbers are arbitrary, and how you value it may be very different than how someone else values. But as you start to put numbers to the page, you'll get a feeling for what that right number is for you. Okay? So again, for Patricia, the first question around have you lost or gained undesired weight as a result of not doing work you love, she gave it a 5,000. It was like right on the upper end of having a low effect for her. So then the next question was, are you often sick or fatigued due to stress? Because we know that for a lot of folks, stress manifests itself. They're tired, they're catching bronchitis all the time, what have you. And so for her, it was on the upper end of an immediate effect. She was like, I am always so tired. For Patricia, she's got to have her 2, 3, 4 cups of coffee. She's caffeinated, but she goes to bed sleepy. She wakes up tired. And so for her, it was a negative $10,000. Do you experience depression, anxiety, boredom, or melancholy spirit? This was huge for her. And this is not something that she talks about. This is not something that, people know about her. But it's something that she struggles with, and it impacts her relationships and all kinds of things. And so for her, all she said was the struggle is real, but it was a really big number for her. For you, it may not be that large. You might be someone who kind of, I kind of get down in the dumps a little bit, this and that as a result, and it may not necessarily be that impactful. And so yours might be a much smaller number, or you might not struggle with that at all. Then we get to, has the job or business affected your spiritual life? And what was really interesting is that, she's actually become so much more spiritual in this journey, because Patricia's been trying to kind of figure out her passion and purpose for a really long time. And it's forced her to start to pray more. It's forced her to think about, what? I believe in God. I believe that there's a plan and purpose for my life. How do I find that? And so she's starting to be so much more of a seeker, and so much more faithful, really, in terms of taking steps and taking risk and believing that on the other side that there's good for her. And so for her, it's actually had a positive impact. It's been a medium, because remember, medium's anywhere between 5 and 10. So she's actually given that a positive effect. Has work affected the quality or quantity of time that she spend with her family? That's pretty neutral for her, not a big deal. Has work affected your marriage or intimate relationship? For her, it was a low effect. It was a 3,000, but she says the relationship is feeling more and more strained. And it's more and more strained because she's unhappy, and her unhappiness is affecting her husband. Her husband is like, okay, well, I'm patient about this for like a couple years, but now we got the same song and dance going on. Like, what's happening? Like, he's getting impatient with her. And so that's beginning to kind of put a strain on the relationship. Are you single or divorced because of your focus on your work? Not a real issue for Patricia. clearly. Are you enjoying enough vacation or relaxation time? For her, just she's a workaholic. It's like, nope. She doesn't take the vacation. She doesn't take the time off on the weekends. She's kind of always kind of plugged in some way, somehow. So for her, that's a medium effect. How has your service, contribution, or volunteerism been affected? I got a typo there. I got to fix that. And so for her, she'd always been someone who volunteered. She had a real commitment to her civic duty, and she just hasn't done that. And it hasn't just been because she doesn't have the time. It's energy, it's focus, it's depression. It's a lot of those things that keep her from getting out there and taking on yet another thing. So for her, it has had a small effect. Are you devoting enough time to important outside interests? And for her, that's had a big effect. She's like, I've become one dimensional. And if you knew Patricia, you would know that she was always doing stuff, always on this committee or doing that or doing this, volunteer or going for this, kind of sporting event, or, she's always doing something, and she's just doing a whole lot less. Then some of these middle questions, you'll notice she's left blank because they really haven't had an impact on her. Has your work supported your overall long-term health and wellness? She left that blank. What's the value of this work toward your retirement or your long-term care? And so for some of you, you may be in roles where you've got great benefits, you've got matching 401ks and all of that. And so even though you may not like the work, or you may be bored with the work does have a positive impact on your life. And so again, even though you're in this program, all of these should not necessarily be negative. There's a reason why you've stayed on your job or whatever, and it's because there are some benefits to it. And so you want to acknowledge those benefits as well to then be able to see where we net out. We go down a little bit further. How does your work support long-term care and aspirations for your children? This is an important question that I want you to think about, because the tendency is to think about this just purely from an economic or financial standpoint. Like, okay, I make good money on my job, if you do, and this allows me to have savings or allows me to put my kids into private school or whatever. But I also want you to think about this from the perspective of what you want in terms of your relationship with your child. Like, as you think about what this work is doing with you or for you and how that's affecting your relationship with your kids, does it support your long-term aspirations as it relates to things that may be non-monetary? Okay, and so everyone will determine, this differently. And so I just want to give you different angles on how you can start to think about that. Because for some people, yes, I can give my kid every toy, everything they could ever want, but then they're 18 and I don't know them. And, I had a colleague who was like that. He was a serial entrepreneur, super successful in the business world, and his relationship with his growing, almost adult children was just absolutely in shambles. And so, yes, he's doing great over here, but it's been at a real price to him as it relates to his kids. And had he thought about that 10, 12 years earlier, he may have made some different decisions in terms of how he was building, even though he was doing work that he was very passionate about. Okay, so how does your current situation affect your self-esteem and your confidence? And so here is the deal for Patricia. Patricia she's a rock star in her company. She gets lots of kudos. She performs at the highest level. She gets the awards. She gets the recognition. And so for her, I'm a pretty important person in my company. I'm kind of feeling pretty good about myself. So from a self-confidence standpoint, the work actually feeds her ego. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But when you're someplace that feeds your ego, it's a lot harder to let that go too. So she was able to quantify that. Does your mood these days attract or repel people? Like sometimes, you're not the most pleasant person to be around when you're frustrated and you're annoyed and you feel stuck, right? And so if that's impacting you in some way, give it some kind of a number. And lastly, does this work supports and provides opportunity for future work I want to do? That's awkwardly written, isn't it? So I'll change that. But the question becomes, are in your current role, even though it may not be perfect and it may not be ideal, one of the questions you want to ask yourself is, if I stay in this role, like if I future pace, 5 years out, 10 years out, even 2 years out, is this setting me up brilliantly to do work that I really love to do? And you have to have an honest question, an honest answer about that, because sometimes you can answer that out of fear. Like, oh, well, I'm staying on this job because I can, if I get promoted, I'll be able to do this or that or the other. And you know that even if you get promoted one or two levels up, when you look one or two levels up, that's not really what you want to do either. Like I had a client and she was talking about the fact that, she wanted to make a certain amount of money. And she was like, well, those at the executive committee on the executive level, they're making the kind of money that I want to make. And so the question becomes, well, yeah, you can make $300,000 to $500,000 or whatever if you want. And at the executive committee, they are making that kind of money. But here's the question. Do you want to be doing that? Like, is that how you want to be making your 300 to 500,000? There's lots of ways to make, multiple six figures. The question becomes, is that work that you really want to do? Right? And so you want to ask yourself as well, yes, I can get promoted. Yes, I can advance. But is this track really advancing me and giving me a future in the work that I want to do as opposed to the work that I feel like I'm pigeonholed to do? That's a very different question, okay? And so again, that could be a positive response, that could be a negative response. Then the last and probably the most important question is for you to future pace out and say, you know what, 3 years from now, if I don't do anything, if I don't step out, step up, if I don't make a change, if I am right where I am right now, paint the picture of what your life is going to look like. And once you paint that picture, you want to then quantify the effect that that new picture is going to have on your life. So for Patricia, she says, you know what, if I don't make, real changes now, I don't know if my husband and I will even be together. He complains so much about me being tired and stressed and nasty. I don't want to hear it, but deep down, I know he deserves more. I am overweight. I know I'm not as healthy as I can be. And if I'm honest, the kids aren't getting enough of my time either. I feel like getting in the car and driving until I run out of gas. I want out. The problem is not just the job, it's me. I've got to figure out what I want, and I've got to be brave enough to go get it. This just isn't working, right? And so even as you read what she writes, you feel that, right? And so then she has to quantify, okay, well, what figure would I put on this effect in my life? And so she gives it a big whopping $15,000. Right? And so then once you've got all the numbers, you'll see that on par, she's got about $10,000 worth of positive benefits for being where she's at. And she's got $70,000 worth of negative, I guess you can't say negative benefit, but negative consequence to where she is. And so if you take the two of those together, the net income for her is not $105,000, which is where she started. It's actually $45,000. And again, because those mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual taxes start to drain on you because you're paying the price some way. You may not be paying the price in terms of dollars, but you're paying the price in some way. And so for Patricia, it was a big wake-up call because she's starting to see, man, I'm paying for this. I'm paying for this. But let's take a look at another example, Jordan's example. Now, with Jordan, her situation's a little bit different. Jordan started out with $145,000, and I'm not going to go through each one of these line items because I described some of them. I'm just going to go through the ones that Jordan had impact on. So she starts out with $145,000. Then the question becomes, and the reason I'm bringing up Jordan, just so that you're clear and you don't feel like, oh gosh, we're going through the same example. I'm going to bring up Jordan's because their results were very different. And I wanted to put kind of two extreme differences because we don't know what your result's going to be like, and I want you to be able to interpret it accurately. So with Jordan, the one that came up for her, do you experience depression, anxiety, boredom, and a melancholy spirit? And so for her, it was a small impact. She says, you know what, I sometimes get down. Very different, right, from Patricia, who had, gosh, what did she say, 20,000. Right? And so again, Every person's different and your experiences are going to be different. So that's why we have that low, medium, and kind of high scale. Then, has the career or business affected your spiritual life? She too has said, you know what, I think this journey has actually made me more spiritual. I think it's made me more faithful. And so she gives it a positive about $2,000. When we get into her relationship, has work affected your marriage or your intimate relationship? Yeah, she's like 20, we bicker, because I complain about this so much. And so she gave it a figure. Are you enjoying enough vacation or relaxation time? And so for her, she's like, I get it in, but I'd like more. And so again, it's not like I'm working 24/7 and all of that, but she still doesn't have the kind of freedom and the kind of flexibility that she wants when it comes to her work. Are you devoting enough time to important outside interests? For her, it was a negative 2K. There's other things that, she's not getting enough of the interest that she really wants. Here's something that's interesting. She says, what's the value of this work towards your retirement and long-term care? And so for her, it's very positive. Again, she's got a pretty decent income. She's got some, great benefits from her company, matching this and that and the other. And so as it relates to her retirement and then her future, she's like, I've got a good setup here. If I stay the course, and she had a career pathing that would only get better. She's starting to get stock options and get vested and all those kinds of things. And so she's like, yeah, this is a pretty good situation. How does your work support your desire to care for your children long-term, financially, emotionally, and otherwise? And so for her, she gave it a positive, and she gave it a positive because there's so much from a financial perspective that she's able to do for her kids through the role. But what she says is, this is a good setup if I stay the course, but I'm not sure if I'm the best version of me for my kids. And so again, there's a price that you pay for not doing work that you love. And part of that price is, man, I'm just not that best version of me. At least that's the case for Jordan. Then, how does this current situation affect your self-esteem, your confidence, or satisfaction with yourself? Interestingly enough, she gives it a negative 7,000, which again is in that medium range. And here's what she said. She says, secretly, I feel like I'm settling out of fear. And the thing about Jordan's a go-getter. She's an achiever. And so part of her identity is this idea of like, I go for it. I do my thing, I set a goal and I hit it. And so for her, even though the world's kind of like applauding her, oh my gosh, you're so great, we're so impressed, she doesn't feel like she's her best self. And over time, that's become increasingly more frustrating for her. Does your mood these days attract or repel people? And so she put a negative 2K on that because she's kind of bitchy at home a little bit. And then as we get through, to the end for her to future pace 3 years out, she says, honestly, nothing catastrophic will happen if I don't change anything. Our family will be fine. The kids will be provided for. I will be pretty respected within my circle. I'll be bored as hell personally. I'm becoming increasingly more bored. And I think that's the biggest annoyance for me right now. Is that enough for me to change? I also believe that I was just born for more. I expect more of myself, and I'm not sure how to quantify that disappointment. And so again, when you start to look at, Jordan's number, her net income was $120,000. Now again, that's all relative. Some people would look at $120,000 and be like, she's doing all right, right? She's still in that six-figure camp, blah, blah, blah. Other people, $120,000 is chump change. Like, you got to be kidding me, right? And so there's no right or wrong answer here. It's really about what you value. But there's a difference though. When we look at Patricia, when you're dealing with numbers like $45,000, things like that, you start to feel a little more pain. When you're dealing with 120K, sometimes the issue becomes I'm disturbed or I'm unhappy, but I'm not unhappy enough to change. There's a comfort zone there. And so between those two women, the person who is in greater risk of not hitting the goal of doing work that they love and getting paid for it is actually Jordan, because she is far more comfortable in her situation than Patricia is. There's far less pain. Patricia's got the pain of, just being tired and the health stuff. She's got the pain of depression. She's got the pain of a lot of things. Jordan's got some pain too, but it's a little bit different, and she's got a lot more comfort zone going on. And so you have to start to see where you are, because if up until this point you have not been aggressive about doing work that you love, particularly if it's been something that's been gnawing at you for years, it's likely because you got a big comfort zone going on. It's likely because there's not enough pain in your life to disturb you. And so being able to even notice that will help you to figure out, like, yo, I've got to make some real decisions because life is not going to make the decision for me. For Patricia, life is doing more of making that decision for her because she's being so disturbed and her life is being so disrupted. And so some of you on the call can relate to that. Like, it's a wrap for you. It's boom or bust. Like, you are committed to this. But for others, you're still not totally committed, and your numbers can reflect why. Okay, so again, when you go through this process for yourself, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to download the spreadsheet in the module that's called your net income. And then you're going to get comfortable with this value key. Again, for things that, for things that have a smaller or minimum effect for you, it's going to be valued between 1 to 5,000. For those that have medium effects on you, it's going to be between 5 and 10. And for those that have a large effect, it's going to be between 10 and 12. Okay, so that should make some good sense for you. And again, the values are completely up to you. So don't feel like you have to enter a value for every single effect, because some of those things are going to be totally neutral. Here, however, is where the rubber starts to meet the road with your questions. So the first question is going to be, what's your reaction to your net income? Is the final figure noticeably low, and does that disturb you? And again, for Patricia, it disturbed her. She was like, oh, something's got to change. For some of you, when you look at the number, it's not going to disturb you for all the reasons that I said before. And if it doesn't disturb you, you need to think about that. Not that you have to be disturbed, but you've got to realize that your biggest obstacle is going to be the fact that you're not disturbed. And that's going to be something that you're going to have to overcome in a different and kind way, because you don't have the natural pain associated that's going to motivate you to change. Does it make sense? And so then on question 2, if the final figure is respectively high by other people's standards, is it high enough for you? Are you in any way disappointed by the final figure, right? And the reason I ask you that question is because just because someone else will look at $120,000 and say, hey, you're doing all right, if my standard and my goal and where I want to be is multiple 6 figures, $500,000, $1 million plus, this $120,000 is not going to cut it, right? And so even though it may be great and a win for somebody else, doesn't mean that it has to be a win for you. And when you start to look at, where you are and you think, man, if I stay the course, I'm going to be maxing out at 200K, or I'm going to be maxing out at, 180,000 or whatnot, it may not be worth the price that it's costing you in other ways. You're like, man, I want more. And I can't get more if I do this thing here. Right? So again, I'm putting this out there because this is the most subjective of all the modules, because this is about what you want. And no one can challenge what you want as being right or wrong, right? And so you have to then start to think, yes, I'm making good money if you are in a Jordan case, and good is relative, and is that good enough? And so those are the questions that you want to ask yourself at that stage, because then that will determine how committed you are to stepping out and taking the risk, right? 3, how does understanding your net income influence you? Are you motivated to make the change? And if so, what change do you want to make? So again, generally speaking, the lower the number relative to where you want to be in your world, the more motivated you're going to be to change. The more in line that number is with where your comfort zone is financially, the harder it is going to be for you to be motivated. 4, do you feel fine with your results? Meaning that your current working situation doesn't create much discomfort for you at all. If so, could your lack of discomfort be a reason you haven't taken massive action toward doing work that you love to date? Now, we've already covered this. We get it, right? But I will say it one more time. If you are the person who is really in the comfort zone, specifically financially and otherwise, this is an issue. This is the thing. When you are unhappy, but you're not unhappy enough to change, you end up in the most dangerous place of all. And so I just want to put it out there so that you know that you know where you're working with here. 5, have you ever thought about the value of your salary from this perspective before? And again, most of us think about it just from the pure numbers. What am I taking home? What's getting deposited into my account? But we do not think about the tax around the spiritual, the physical, the emotional, or the mental, or even the relational, and all the other taxes that come along. So have you ever thought about that before? And then, do we want to get into part B? Here, you know what, I'm going to stop here and I'm going to create a separate video for part B, so then that way you can kind of dive into part A if you want to, get a break from me, and then I'll come back and I'll do part B. Awesome. Bye.